Yeah.
Okay, today's daf. Today's an easy daf. Today's a very interesting daf, and it's a daf that continues on to the theme that we've been discussing over the past day or so. And then we end off with a beautiful story. So today is daf Tez Zayin, but we got up to Tez Vav, 15b, about 18 lines from the top. I'm estimating. By the Gemara says Tashma. Tashma. What are we discussing over here? Let's just make it bigger. We're discussing this idea that we're discussing an idea that Beis Shammai, did they follow through on their opinion? Remember this picture? We've seen it so many times before, that Beis Shammai holds that when Shimon, who's the dead brother, was married to the daughter of Reuven, Rachel, so obviously when he dies, Reuven can't do Yibam to Rachel. That's his daughter. But the Mishnah says that Miriam, the co-wife, goes free. In fact, it would be an Isser for Reuven to marry the co-wife, because at one time she was the co-wife of an erva, so she goes free, and without yibum or chalitza. Beis Shammai says no. Reuven is required to do a yibum or chalitza to Miriam. In fact, they should do yibum or chalitza, and very often, very often they did yibum.
How can I take it?
But Beis Shammai hold hat nicht kein Kinder, and this is a normale Yibum. Darf man machen Yibum do? A viele as the Tzora is gewesen a bas, man darf machen Yibum do. And that's Beis Shammai's opinion. Comes out if Beis Shammai went with their opinion, when they married each other, the kid that's born from this union, right? A kid that's born from that union is a mamzer. A mamzerim. Like Beis Hillel is nicht like Beis Hillel, it's a mamzer. Like Beis Shammai, that's what you're supposed to do. So there's an Issachorus over here marrying. But the other thing is, another problem is that according to Beis Shammai, what Beis Hillel is doing is also wrong. Sending this lady out without chalitza, without anything, is also a problem. Because if she goes and marries a strange person without a yibum or chalitza, it's an Issalav. So that's the question we're discussing. When Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel argued, hi Louis, we just began. 18 lines from the top of Tez Vav Amud Beis by the Tashma. The question that the Gemara is dealing with is, when Beis Shammai says a radical opinion, did they have a group of Beis Shammai people that actually followed through on their opinion? And were there people that actually married the co-wife of a daughter? Tashma. The question is, Sha'alu es Rabbi Yeshua. They asked Rabbi Yeshua, what's his opinion? Who do you hold like? By Tzoras Habas Mahu, the co-wife of a daughter. Who do you hold like? Beis Shammai or Beis Hillel? Amalehem. So he refused to answer that question. And the fact is, he didn't want to say that. He really wants to say the halacha is like Beis Hillel. But he doesn't want to say that, because if he does say the halacha is like Beis Hillel, he's going to insult the people of Beis Shammai, because Beis Shammai's camp were actually having the brother marry the co-wife, and there was mamzerim. And if he said the halacha is like Beis Hillel, he's calling, in effect, in the Beis Shammai's camp, they are mamzerim. So Amalehem, he said to them, machlekes Beis Shammai Beis Hillel. It's a machlekes. He told his students that it's a machlekes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. So they pressed him. Who is the halacha like? Is it like Beis Shammai or Beis Hillel? Amalehem, he didn't want to answer him. How am I going to put my head in between two great mountains, between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel? This is a great big, between two big debaters, basically, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. I'm afraid to get involved, and I'm not paskening. I'm afraid they're going to crush my skull. Basically, he's basically saying that if I paskin like Beis Hillel, the camp of Beis Shammai is going to crush my skull, because I'm basically saying that their children are mamzerim in the cases where the yavam actually married the co-wife. Aval ani meir bechem. He continues teaching his students and says, Rabbi Yeshua, al shtei mishpachos gedolos b'Yerushalayim. There were two great families in Yerushalayim. Now, their names were Mishpachas Beis Tzvoyim ben Achmai or Mishpachas Beis Kafai ben Mikoishesh. These two families, right? Now, Shehem B'nei Tzores, they actually were in the camp of Beis Hillel, and basically the co-wife went out without a Yibam or Chalitza, like Beis Hillel said. But the children from that family, they anointed them as Kahanim Gedolim. They actually served as Kohen Gadol in the Beis Hamikdash. And even Beis Shammai agreed that they can serve as Kohen Gadol, because there really is no problem if you follow Beis Hillel's opinion according to Beis Shammai, because what happens is that the woman leaves without a chalitza. Okay, what's the worst that's going to happen? She's going to marry a strange woman without a kiddushin and without a chalitza. So that person that married her is over a lav, but the children are not mamzerim. It's just an iser lav. So the kid was not a cholol, and they actually served as kahanim gedolim. The shimshu al gabe mizbeach, they actually did the service in the Beis Hamikdash. So ends the brisa. So now the Gemara improves exactly what we've been saying. It must have been in the Rabbi Yeshua's time that the fringe group Beis Shammai actually followed through on what they were on their opinion, and they actually had Yabam marry a co-wife. Because also, if you say that Beis Shammai followed through on their opinion, so then the whole brisa makes sense. That's why Rabbi Yeshua is saying, I'm afraid to tell you who the halacha is, because if you paskin like Beis Hillel, he's also insulting Beis Shammai and actually saying, in effect, that the Beis Shammai's children are mamzerim. Also, if you're going to say that that Beis Shammai didn't follow their opinion, that once Beis Shammai ruled, they actually didn't follow through on their opinion. They acquiesced and became humble and said, you know what, the halacha is like Beis Hillel, despite our opinion. So then my kama misyarani, why was he afraid? No, the Beis Shammai were not doing like their opinion. They were actually always going like Beis Hillel. So the Gemara, so Elamai, this is where the Gemara concludes. We see this common times that the Gemara is proving that in the times of the Mishnayos, that there were groups, fringe groups of Beis Shammai people that actually went with everything that Beis Shammai said, including having a Yavam marry a co-wife of an Erva. So the Gemara says, okay, I'll grant you that. Nihami da'asi. I agree that they actually, Beis Shammai did what they did. But why was Rabbi Yeshua afraid? If he said that the halacha is like Beis Hillel, Rabbi Yeshua has another opinion that would hold that Beis Shammai's kids would not be mamzerim, actually, because what would happen? That the Yavam would marry the co-wife. According to that, the Yavam marrying a co-wife, which is really an Eishes Ach, is only doing marrying somebody with an Issa Kares to it. It's not such a worst type of erva like marrying your mother or marrying a sister. So there would be no mamzerim. So why is he so afraid? He's not, by saying the halacha is like Beis Hillel, he's not in effect calling the children of Beis Shammai mamzerim. That's what Gemara is saying. Why was he so afraid? Rabbi Yeshua's opinion is ein mamzer el mechayove mises bezdin. Rabbi Yeshua has a strict opinion of when you could call somebody a mamzer, only if it came through an illicit relationship, like an Ashish Ish, like a married woman having relations. That's a skila Isser. So you get Mises Bezdin, that the kid is a mamzer, but not from an Isser Koris of a Yovam marrying his brother's wife. So if he paskin like Beis Hillel, it doesn't automatically say that the children of Beis Shammai are mamzerim. So why was he so afraid? So the Gemara says, Nihi nami de mamzer lehava, but true, he wasn't afraid to call them mamzerim, paga miahava. But by the children that come out from that kind of a relationship of the brother marrying the co-wife in sin, makes that if the child was a kohen, he would be called a cholol, and he wouldn't be allowed to take a job in the Beis Hamikdash. And that's something that would be very insulting to Beis Shammai, that their children from the Kahanim, if a Kohen did this, married the co-wife of the Erva, then the child would be possible to serve in the Beis Hamikdash. And how would you know that? Kal v'chomer almona. I have a kal v'chomer from when a Kohen Gadol marries an almona. One of the things that you know in the Chumash that says that a Kohen Gadol is not allowed to marry a widow. So ma almona, a widow. When a Kohen Gadol marries an almona, he's doing an avera. And she'ein isur nayeh b'kol. Marrying a widow is not only by a Kohen Gadol. It's not an isur on everybody. It's only an isur on a Kohen Gadol, not even a regular Kohen. But what happens when that happens? B'na pogam, the child that's born from such a union of a kohen gadol marrying an almana is a cholol, is possible to serve in the Beis Hamikdash. Zu, in this case, which is an issa karis, it means a brother marrying his brother's wife in sin, according, if you paskin like Beis Hillel, that everybody is not allowed to marry your brother's wife. Certainly, the child that's born from such a union would be a chalal and would not be able to serve in the Beis Hamikdash. Therefore, Rabbi Yeshua did not want to paskin like Beis Hillel, because if he paskins like Beis Hillel, he's not calling the children of Beis Shammai mamzerim, but he's calling them chalalim, people who cannot serve in the Beis Hamikdash. Okay, now the Gemara asks a side question. Let's try to understand the conversation here. Kaboyim and Tzoris, they were asking, can you marry the co-wife? Can the brother marry the co-wife of the erva? The kapashat le b'nei Tzoris, and they're answering them, oh, the children are kosher. What their children became kahanim gedolim. What does it mean? So the Gemara explains, Tartu Kaboyim and they were asking Rabbi Yeshua two questions. Tzoris mao, can you marry the co-wife? Can the brother marry the co-wife? And he didn't want to answer that explicitly, but they asked him another question. Even if you want to say that you hold like Beis Hillel, that you're not allowed to marry the tzoros, the co-wife, and b'nei tzoros the Beis Hillel, Beis Shammai mahu, according to Beis Shammai, who also had a say. They had a say in the Beis Hamikdash, and they had a say in the Beis Hamikdash of who could become Kohen Gadol. It wasn't strictly Beis Hillel. That Beis Shammai camp had to agree who they're going to elect as Kohen Gadol. But the B'nai Tzoros, the ones that left and went out, the co-wife that left without a Yibam or Chalitza, married a strange person, and the union that brought a child, can that person serve in the Beis Hamikdash? According to Beis Shammai, the strange person that's marrying that woman, that co-wife, is being over an Isser Lav. And a child born from an Isalav, would that make it a chalal? So the Gemara says, this is what Rabbi Yeshua has told him. No, it would not make him a chalal. In fact, they had children of such a union that actually served as kahanim gedolim. So the only time something could become a chalal is if the union of a child born from a union that's mises bezdin or kares, not a lav. Lamai nafka mena. What is a practical halacha that you could learn? Give me a practical common case that I would learn from such a thing, because anyway the halacha is like Beis Hillel and they actually didn't do anything wrong. So lemishrat vlad machse grushasei the Beis Hillel, to solve the problem of somebody who marries his divorcee. A person, a regular woman, a regular kohen had a wife. Let's say a regular kohen had a wife, okay, and then he divorced her. Fine. That woman got married to somebody else and got a divorce from that other person. So the Torah says that the Kohen certainly cannot remarry his divorced wife for two reasons. One, she's divorced, and two, because she was married to somebody else. Now he remarries her. If he remarries her, right, and this doesn't necessarily have to be a Kohen, even in Yisrael, because the daughter could be a Chal. So since the person who's remarrying her is being over a lav, would that child be a chalal? So mi kamrin and kal v'choyma, wouldn't you say the same kal v'choyma? If you have a marriage with an isser lav, would that disqualify the child from ever serving in the Beis Hamikdash? Because ma'almana kohen gadol sheni sir shavim kal b'na pogum. When almana marries a kohen gadol, so that's an isser lav, and a widow marrying a kohen gadol, and it's not an isser that it's for everybody. The child is disqualified from serving in the Beis Hamikdash. This is an Isser. Every Jew has this Isser. That means nobody is allowed to remarry his wife that married somebody else in the interim. You can't remarry a wife unless she was not married. But if she was married to somebody else in the interim, you can't take her back. So if you're doing such a Isser Lav, certainly ain't a din shabbat pagadim, that the child that's born from such a union is disqualified from serving the Beis Hamikdash. That's one way to look at it. When an almana marries a kohen gadol, not only does the child become a chalal, but that almana, that widow, when let's say the kohen gadol dies, that almana can never marry a regular kohen. Although a regular kohen can marry an almana, that almana he can't marry because she was married in sin to one person. But so therefore she becomes a chalal herself. But this woman, a machzir grushasha, she anyway was not permitted to marry a kohen. She didn't become a chal because of that, because of the avera of marriage. She was already disqualified from marrying a kohen because she was a grusha. So the question is, the case of machzir grushasha, would the child be disqualified from kahuna because there was an iser lav, v'amalahu tsaris misyareni? I'm afraid to answer you about the question of co-wife. That's what Rabbi Yeshua is saying. But here we go with that Tezvav Amid Aleph, Tezayin Amid Aleph, B'nei Tsaris Ani Melechem. The child of such a union, according to Beis Hillel, where the co-wife married somebody, a strange person without chalitza, right? Because they go free according to Beis Hillel without chalitza. Beis Shammai didn't disqualify them for serving as kohen gadlus in the Beis Hamikdash, although according to Beis Shammai, somebody doing that is the marriage is being over an iser lav because he's marrying somebody without doing gibam and chalitza. So we see that a union that has an iser lav to it does not disqualify the child from serving in the Beis Hamikdash. Only if the union was an Issa Kares is the child a chalal disqualified from you serving the Beis Hamikdash. But if there's an Issa Lav, not so. It doesn't disqualify. And therefore, you can resolve the other question of Machzir Gerushasai. If someone takes back his Gerusha, right, and he's over an Issa Lav for marrying his Gerusha, who was intermittently married to somebody else, that child would be able to, is not disqualified from serving in the Beis Hamikdash. Okay, Tashema, the final thing, and this leads us into a beautiful, beautiful story, and then I'll take us smoothly through the end of the page. It's one long story. Tashema, Bimei Rab Daisa ben Hurkinis, in the days of Daisa ben Hurkinis, he paskined like Beis Shammai, this Daisa ben Hurkinis. Hutra, they gave, it was permitted. Tzoras Abbas, the co-wife was of the daughter, co-wife of an erva, is permitted to marry la'achim to the brother. Shma Mina, from this we can prove definitively, also the fringe group Beis Shammai always followed through on what they did. Shma Mina, that's the truth. That it's not like after the Bas Koil or after they figured out that Beis Hillel was the majority, Beis Shammai said, okay, we give up on our opinion. No, they kept following their opinion, and they actually had cases of where a brother would marry the co-wife. So Gufa, we learned in this story before, Bimei Rab Yosef ben Hurkinis, Hitiru Tzaras Abbas la'achem v'hayadova, they permitted Tzaras Abbas la'achem. In other words, Rab Yosef ben Hurkinis paskined like Beis Shammai. Now hear this story. V'hayadova kosh la'chachamim. All the chachamim were very against this. It's very difficult. He gave such a heter. He said it's permitted, because he's paskening wrong. The halacha is like Beis Hillel. He was such a great chacham, and everybody followed this great Rab Daisa ben Hurkinis. The ain of coming, but the problem was he never came to shul. Why? Because Rashi says the ain of kamo. He stopped seeing. In his old age, he wasn't seeing well, so he was blind, and that stopped him. His eyes stopped him from coming to the shul. So they had to go to his house and debate him to get him to change his mind that he should not paskin like Beis Shammai. Amru, they said, Mi yelech v'yadir. They had a debate who's going to come and debate him, because he's very smart and you don't want to send anybody to debate him. Amr lehem Rabbi Yeshua says, Ani yelech. I'm going and I'll debate him. But I need a backup. Ba'achar of me, who should back me up? Rab Lazar ben Azariah. And I want somebody to back up Rab Lazar ben Azariah. Ba'achar of me, Rabbi Akiva. So, and again, Rabbi Yeshua, behind him was Rabbi Lazar ben Azariah, behind Rabbi Lazar ben Azariah, Rabbi Akiva. They all lined up and they headed towards Rabbi Daisa ben Hurkinis' home. It seems to me that he was a very wealthy person also. You'll see in a moment. Halchu, they went, the Amdal Pesach Beisai, they stood at his door and they knocked on the door, and his maid answered him. He had a maid, a Goyish woman maid. Nichnasa Shivchasai, and so the maid came to him. And Amrlai, and I always find this fascinating. A lot of the Tanaim had servants, but he had a shiksa. Amrlai, she said to the rabbi, Rebbe, Chachmi Yisrael boin etzlecha. Rabbi Daisa, great chachamim are here to visit you. Amrlai, he told the Yekansu, let them come in. V'nichnasu, they went in. Tefasei Rabbi Yeshua v'hishiva al mita shazav. He grabbed Rabbi Yeshua and had him sit down on a golden chair. Amrlai, Rebbe, so Rabbi Yeshua said, I have a friend here with me. Can I call in another friend to sit down also here? Amalai Mihu. Who's this other friend? Rabbi Lazar ben Azariah. Oh, Rabbi Lazar ben Azariah. They're calling him Rabbi Lazar ben Azariah. Now, Azariah was a very rich person. And if you're calling Rabbi Lazar the son of Azariah, it must be that he took over the business and he's also very rich. So Rabbi Daisa ben Hurkas was very proud of that. That fact is that a son could take over the business and still maintain the wealth. Amalai, he said, the Yesh ben Azariah Chaverenu, does my friend Azariah have a son? And he was a great person, Azariah, and a wealthy person. Kara Olav HaMikra, he called on Rabbi Lazar ben Azariah this following pasuk, Nara Yisi. He said, when I was younger, I saw your father Azariah, he's rich. Gam Zakanti, now that I'm old, I see Rabbi Lazar, you're rich. And it's glad that I'm not seeing a tzaddik that's forsaken and his children are seeking out bread. It's nice to see a rich Tana. That's what he's saying. I think he was proud of him that usually when somebody like that inherits a lot of money, they make a small fortune from a big fortune, as the joke says. They made a small fortune from a big fortune, but now that he kept the fortune, the money, so he was very proud of him. Tafasa, he grabbed Rabbi Lazar ben Azariah by Shiva Alamita Shazav. Again, you see he's grabbing because he's blind. Amalai Rabbi Yeshua said, before we get into a conversation, have one more student. Can you call my other student and let him sit? Amalei Mihu, who is that other student? So he said, Akiva ben Yosef, Akiva, the son of Yosef. So when Rabbi Akiva walked in, Amalei, Rabbi Daisa said to him, Atuhu Akiva ben Yosef, you're Akiva ben Yosef, your name goes on from one end of the world to the other end of the world. That means you're very, very famous. Now I saw that if you take the gematria of Misoif ha'olam v'atsoif ha'olam, the gematria of that words are 564, which is the amount of times that you'll find Rabbi Akiva mentioned his name in Shas, 564 times. So this is something like a Reb Chaim Kanievsky type of vart would say. Anyway, but it's written by the Mitzapa Esa. So anyway, Rabbi Akiva took the compliment. Shave b'ni shave. We should see more Jewish people like you. In other words, Rabbi Akiva came from Gerim. His grandparents were actually converts. So, and to see somebody who comes from Goyish lineage to be such a great person, we would like to see that come from the emerge from the family, the Jewish family, the true Jewish family from the beginning. Anyway, they started talking to him about other dinim till they reached the question about, can you marry the co-wife? They asked him, what's your opinion on Tzaras Abbas? He told her, says, you should know it's an argument between Bishama and Basila. So they pressed him. Halacha Gediremi, who is the halacha like? Halacha kebeis Hillel. I hold like that the halacha is like Beis Hillel. They said to him, but we have it that it's going in the streets that from your name, everybody's saying that the halacha is like Beis Shammai. So he said, I didn't say the halacha is like Beis Shammai. He said, Doise Shematim. Did you hear Doise ben Hurkinis is saying halacha Beis Shammai? Or ben Hurkinis Shematim? Or do you hear that a son of Hurkinis says the halacha Beis Shammai? Because there's a big difference. If I'm the one that's saying, or maybe it's my brother who's also a son of Hurkinis. We swear on the life of a Rebbe, you're right. Stam Shemana. We heard the son of Hurkinis is the one going around saying halacha Beis Shammai. So he said to him, Ach katan yeshli. I have a small brother, Bechar Satanhu. He's like the firstborn of the Satan. In other words, he's devilishly smart and he doesn't give in so easily, even if you convince him. And his name is V'yonis and Shmai. He's so sharp, he's from the students of Shammai, and don't get into a debate for him because he'll never change his mind. Be careful, you shouldn't debate him in halachas because he's so smart, he'll prove to you that Beis Shammai is correct. He'll tell you 300 ways and reasons why the co-wife of the daughter is permitted. So don't debate him. Aval I swear in the name of God, so to speak, Shal meduchazu yashav Chagai Novi. There was a Chagai Novi stood on a stage, on a high place. V'omar, and he mounts shloisha dvarim. The great Chagai, the prophet, said this. He said, Tzaras Abbas Asura. The Navi said, Tzaras Abbas is not permitted. And then, Amain Umoyev Ma'asr Ma'asr Oni Bashvias. People living in Aman and Moav, which is basically where Jordan is today, they actually, on Shemitah, have to give off Meiser Ani. We're going to discuss this in a minute. And also, it can accept converts from people who come from Kardian. So let's ignore the last two things he said. Chagai and Navi, and we'll come back to it in a moment. But the first thing, Chagai and Navi, the great prophet, said that Tzaras Abbas Asura, that the Tzaras, the co-wife, is Asur. So that's why Rab Doisa agreed that Tzaras Abbas is prohibited, but he said he had his very smart brother that held that it was not permitted, that it was permitted. He held it was prohibited, and his brother, the devilishly smart brother, Yonason, held it's permitted because he was a student of Bishamit. Tana, we learned in the Brisa, when Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Elazar B'Zai, Rabbi Kiva came into the house, they came in Pesach Echad, they came in through one door. Yotzu, when they left the house, Yotzu B'Shloisha Pesachim, they tried to leave in three different directions because they didn't want to bump into Yonason. But nevertheless, God made it. Paga Boy Rabbi Kiva. Yonason, the devilishly smart brother from the student of Bishamai, met Rabbi Akiva. Actually, Rabbi Akiva, or he asked Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Akiva asked him back. But he nevertheless stood his opinion and didn't want to change his mind that the halacha is like Beis Hillel, although Rabbi Akiva had what to say to him. Amalai, so Yonason said, Atuhi Akiva Shashimcha Hoilach Masayfa Hoil Matzayfa. You're the great Rabbi Akiva that you're so famous. Your name is goes from one end of the world to the other. Ashrecha Shezichi Salashem. You're praiseworthy that you merited to be so famous. But you're famous. You're not even like a shepherd of cattle. In other words, I don't think you're so great. Basically, and in his humility, Rabbi Akiva answered back, Rabbi Akiva, you're saying I'm not like, I feel that I'm even less than a shepherd of sheep. So I'm not sure what this debate was, but it seems to be like an insult, and Rabbi Akiva took it in stride and said, I feel lower than a shepherd of sheep. Anyway, the number two thing that Chagai Hanavi said as a Navi, he said, Amin a Moav, Masasur Masa Oni Bashviyas. Amin a Moav, if you live in Jordan, you give Meiser Oni, 10% you have to give in Shemitah. You see, in Amin a Moav, by the Jordan area, there was a Kedusha at one time when they lived during the first temple, the first Commonwealth. The first common that if you lived there, you had to give off Trumas and Maestris, and probably you had to be Noyek Shemitah. When they came up in the second Commonwealth, during the second Beis Hamikdash, they didn't control that area. But nevertheless, they required that area to give off Trumas and Maestris every single year, albeit midrabanan. It's so close to Eretz Yisrael, they have to give off Trumas and Maestris. On Shemitah time, they required them, even though it's Shemitah in Eretz Yisrael, they required them to give off Meiser Ani. And this is not, it was common. So therefore, every year they were giving off different Meisers. So during the regular Shemitah cycle, they followed the cycle in Israel. And Shemitah, when there is no Trumas and Meisers in Eretz Yisrael, because everything is free, in Jordan, they give off Meiser Ani. And this was a machlekes in the Mishnayos, because the Mishnayos says that in Egypt, they did that as well, that they gave Trumas and Meisers in Egypt, and on Shemitah, they gave Meiser Ani. The question was, Amin Amayev, do you give Meiser Sheni or Meiser Ani? And the halakha is that you give Meiser Ani during that year. The Amamar, we learned before, Harbe Karakim Kafshu Mitzrayim Kafshu. The first Commonwealth, the people that came up from Egypt and took over Israel, they captured a lot of land. But the second Commonwealth, like Kafsha Ilabava, they weren't as big as the first Commonwealth, so they didn't capture those land. So the Kedusha Rishayna, the first holiness that they tried to be Mekadesh places that they captured was Kitcha Lashata, was only holy at that time. When the first Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, the holiness of those areas flew away. Like Kitcha Lashata, it didn't remain holy forever. V'hinicham, and so they kept it that there's only chayav trumas meiser midrabanan, but they left it that they should give off meiser ani kadesh yismuch aleim aniyim b'shviyas. So Shemitah time, since there's a shortage of produce anyway in Eretz Yisrael, poor people can run over to Am and Amoyev in Jordan and pick up meiser ani over there and get a job working on fields because there's no Shemitah over there. Now, another thing Chagai Navi said, if a ger from Karduyim, from this place called Karduyim, walks into your office and says he wants to become a converted Jew, you accept him. Now, why wouldn't you accept him? He looks goyish, but the answer is because there at one time there were Jewish women that lived in Karduyim, and they had relationships with goyim, and the halacha is, according to Rabbi Akiva, that this kind of a relationship can produce mamzerim. So really, they're Jews. They look like goyim, but they're mamzerim Jews. And if you bring them you convert them, people will think they're regular Jews, and you'll have mamzerim marrying into regular Jews. So you might think so. So the Gemara says that Rabbi Chagi says no, they're all goyim. That means there's most of them, 90% they were goyim. But Talmudim also is the same idea, that maybe mamzerim got mixed up in there, and we don't know. Maybe they're Jews. No, the answer is if they look like a guy, act like a guy, you can assume that they're goyim and not Jewish mamzerim, and you can make them converted. If they come to you to become gerim, you accept them. Eini, you're saying Karduyim is a place where you can accept gerim. You don't accept gerim from Karduyim. Rav Ashi says Kartuyim itma. You're misquoting Rami Bar Cheskel. He says don't accept gerim from Kartuyim. Kartuyim sounds like Karduyim, but it's a different place. Kedamar Ishi, like people say Kartuyim. If you come from Kartuyim, Pisulim, you're actually a Jew, but you're a mamzer. And therefore, we don't accept gerim from those places because we assume that they're Jews. Others say, he actually said that. You don't, but the others say the version of the story was like this. Rabbi Bar Cheskel says you don't accept gerim from Kartuyim. My love, I would have thought, Hainu Kartuyim, Hainu Karduyim. Rabbi Bar Cheskel is basically saying Kartuyim. You don't never accept gerim from these places. Rav Ashi explained it. No, loy kartuye lechud. Kartuye is one place. The karduye with the dalit is another place, and therefore the amar inche kartuye with the tough pasuli is possible. Karduye is kosher, and you could accept gerim from there. Rabbi Yochanan v'Savaya ta'amri tavaya. Rabbi Yochanan Savaya says ein mekablim gerim in hatarmoidim. We don't accept gerim from this place called Tarmoid. Again, because we assume that they look like goyim, but really they're mamzerim there. Because years back, they were goyim that married Jewish women. So really, they're mamzerim. Did Rabbi Yochanan say that Talmudim is not a place where you could accept we accept gerim from? Well, tonight we learned in the Mishnah. If you find Rekem was a place where mostly goyim live there. If you find a pair of underwear, a woman's underwear that has a blood stain on it, it's tahar. You don't assume it came from a Jewish woman and the blood is tamei blood, nida blood. No, we assume it came from a goyish lady, and the goyish lady's blood is not tamei. Rabbi Yehuda metame. Rabbi Yehuda says any underwear that you find there with blood on it is tamei. Mipnei shein gerim. Rekem had gerim there. At one time they were Jews, and they reconverted v'toyim. They decided to convert back into becoming goyim again. Mibein hagoyim tahirim. V'toyim mibein hagoyim v'toyim, and they're making they went back to the old ways. Mibein hagoyim, but if you find amongst the goyim a bloodstained underwear, tahirim, then it's tahar. We asked, we go to Amud Beis, Kapasik Vitani, the Brisa says, Mi Bein Hagoyim, that you find any underwear from Goyim is tar. Vafilum in Tarmoid. Even if you find, if you go to Tarmoid and you find underwear with blood on it, it is tar. It must be that Tarmoid only had Goyim, not Jews there. That proves it. You can accept converts from Tarmoid because there are no Jews living there. They're not Jews, lost Jews. They're really not Jews. So So Rabbi Yochanan did say you do accept Gerim from Tarmud. So you have a question, what did Rabbi Yochanan say? Can you say that this means that Rabbi Yochanan just said you could accept, but he himself personally does not hold of that? But Rabbi Yochanan, halakha is not Mishnah. The halakha is like a plain Mishnah or a plain Brisa. And therefore, it's seemingly that Rabbi Yochanan holds by what he just said, and it would agree what you can what you can deduce from the Brisa that you would accept Gerim from Tarmud. You don't think they're lost Jews over there. So it answers the Gemara. There was a question of what Rabbi Yochanan says, and there's a machlokes amaroim. Do you paskin like a Stam Mishnah? Do you not paskin like a Stam Mishnah? But the bottom line is, it's a question. Did Rabbi in one place, some amaroim, some students said Rabbi Yochanan said you don't accept gerim from there, and other students said you do accept gerim from there. Now the Gemara explains, like what I've been telling you. Mitarmid ma time aloy, my time aloy. If a guy comes to you from Tarmud, he looks like a guy. Why wouldn't I accept him as a ger? He looks goyish. The reason is because of the servants of Shlomo, and some say because of the daughters of Jerusalem. Let's explain that. Shlomo Melech had these goyish servants that were very wealthy. They worked in the goyim that worked. They had a good job in Shlomo's palace, and they went to Tarmud and actually seduced or married goyish Jewish women, and they had children, and therefore the people that the children of this marriage, a goy or an eved that came on a Jewish woman, havolod mamzer, like Rabbi Akiva holds. It's a chayvei lavim. The kedushin doesn't work, and therefore the child is a mamzer. So Tarmud had a bunch of mamzerim because the servants of Shlomi intermarried with Jewish women there. So that's the story. What's the story about the daughters of Yishlayim? If you say that's how they intermarried, what's that story? It's same idea, but it's different people who intermarried with Jewish women. They're arguing what Rabba Bar Chana said, but the same idea. Chad Amma once said when they were destroying the first Beis Hamikdash, there were 12,000 soldiers, and there were 6,000 people who could handle a bow and arrow. So that's 18,000 people. Right? There were 12,000 soldiers. From that 12,000 soldiers, Shita Alpha Kishtaya, there were 6,000 who could handle bow and arrow. So 18,000 bad soldiers or 12,000 bad soldiers. Why are they so bad? Because they, like Lahavdil, same thing. What the Russians are doing to Ukrainian women, raping them. So you see that in the Gemara also, when they destroyed the first Beis Hamikdash. When they went into the first Beis Hamikdash to destroy it, nifnu al kasav azov. Most of the soldiers went to take the gold and silver in the Beis Hamikdash. The heim nifnu al bnei Yerushalayim. They turned to rape the daughters of Jerusalem. Shnema nashim b'tziyim inu besulas bar Yehuda. The virgins in the cities of Yehuda were raped, and therefore the children of that offspring actually lived in Tarmud. And therefore, that's the story of how Tarmud ended up with Jews who are mamzerim, because it's with goyim, and they, even though they look like goyim and they act like goyim, they're really Jews from birth, and therefore we don't accept them as gerim because we assume they're mamzerim. Two more things and we'll stop. Amar Rab Shmuel bar Nachmeni, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Pasuk zeh sar ha'olam amore. The great. This is just, we brought this pasuk before, so that we're just going to conclude with this pasuk. The pasuk, the one that runs the world, said the following pasuk. There's a malach that oversees this world. Nara yisi gam zakanti. So man amro, I was young and I'm old. Man amro, who said it? Ile mekuche bericho. God's saying that pasuk. Mi'ika zikne kamei. God can ever say that I'm old? God doesn't get old. Vel the David amra, is David HaMelech saying that pasuk? Mi kashas kulahai, did David HaMelech get old? He only lived to 70. He wasn't so old. El shmamina sar ha'olam amore. The one that's oversees the world, that malach, so to speak, says when the world was young, when the world was old, I've seen it all, and I never seen that a righteous person, God will let them be forsaken without food. If someone is a tzaddik, he will always have a parnasa. V'amar Rab Shmuel bar Nachmeni, Amar Rab Yonasan, my diksiv, what is the pasuk says? Another statement from this man Amar. He said, "My diksiv, why does the pasuk say Yadei paratzara al kol machmedeha?" that the hand of the oppressor was on all their treasures. When the Goyim destroyed the first base of Migdash, again, most of them went to the gold and silver. The Haim Nifnu al Sefer Torah, the Aman Amoyev Goyim went to a Sefer Torah in the base of Migdash, and Amru, they opened it up, and it says, the pasuk says there that in our Sefer Torah it says we can never accept a convert from Ammon and Moav. So they were so determined that that's the reason why they hate Jews, and Yisaref Be'esh, and that's why they burned it in fire, and that's why they weren't interested in the money. They were interested in destroying the Sefer Torah that was in the Beis HaMikdash. And then finally, the pasuk says there, Tziva Hashem Yaakov Sviva Tzar. God commanded that wherever the Jews go, there's always anti-Semites around them. Rav says, Kegoin Hamonoya, there are Greeks living in Hamonia, and Lefum Nara that always are anti-Semitic to the Jews living in Pum Nahara, which are poor Jews, Rashi says. And they anti-Semitic and cause problems to the poor Jews living in Pomahara. So one of the things that in Gullus is that you always feel the anti-Semitism. As I explained today in the beginning, that I experienced that today in Bushwick. All right.
Tell me, those